Hello and welcome to this video about what were we doing before spring break, 7th grade edition. Okay, so what we were doing before spring break, we were taking a good look at slope and eventually getting to slope-intercept form linear functions. So what we'll do is kind of break these down into two things. The big thing that we'll focus on though is slope. Now, slope is a ratio. A lot of the things we do in 7th grade math is simply a ratio. And it is a ratio of your rise over your run. Or that another way of thinking that is how much we are going up and down versus how much we're going left or right. And it's describing sort of the way 2 points interact with each other if we drew a straight line from one point to another point. Now with slope, we have a couple things that we need to remember. We have the 4 types. So 4 types. Hopefully you're familiar with these now. We have our positive slope. We have our negative slope. We then have our zero slope. And we have our undefined slope. So this is just U-N-D, undefined. The other thing we have to remember with slope is the formula. M is equal to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And with this, some of the things that we've been doing is try to identify the slope based off of either points on a graph or just by giving the actual points. So if we're given the actual points, something like, let's say 6, 4, and let's go with 10, negative 2, we can figure out what the slope is by using this formula. So what we do is we pick 1 to be 1, 1 to be 2. It doesn't matter which way you do this, it'll all work out the same. But what I do is I then take y2 and I put it into my formula here. So I'll have negative 2 minus 4 over, and then I take x2, put that down there, 10 minus 6, which would go right there. Now I have to simplify the math here a little bit, so for my numbers, negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6, and then 10 minus 6 is 4. This can be reduced down to negative 3 over 2, and that is my slope. Now the other thing we might see is something like where we're given a graph. So it might look something like this. And we're given a couple of points on this graph. So let's say we have a point, keep it simple, here and here. And we have a line going through these points. We want to figure out what is the slope of that line. Well, all we have to do is some basic counting. We count, so we have to remember the slope is a ratio of how far up or down and how far left and right. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. All done. Now, the other thing we have to watch out for is if we have a point that, let's say we have one point here and then one point there. We see this line. We apply this counting game, but when we try to find its slope, we have to take a look at the picture, and the picture is showing a line that's going down from left to right, meaning that it's negative. So 1, 2, 3, negative 3, and then we go over 1, 2, 3, negative 3, and if we can, we reduce. So this slope will actually just be negative 1. So that's slope in a nutshell. Now let's talk about slope-intercept functions. We're going to talk more about this a little bit later, but essentially what SI functions are, y equals mx plus b. That's actually the form for it. But the big difference here is now we're introducing 2 variables. We have y and we have x. And we have this relationship going on where we have a bunch of points that can fit into either of these to kind of make the equation true. And the other thing we have to know about this is that m is our slope and b is our starting point on the y-axis. So starting point on the y-axis, which we would call the y-intercept. And so what this is supposed to be is just a shorthand way of looking at an equation to be able to come up with its graph. So let's say we have a graph and we have y equals 3/4 x minus 2. Well, I go down to my x-axis at negative 2, or my y-axis, sorry, negative 2, and I plot my point there. Then I use this slope to get a couple of different points. So what this is telling me is I have to go up 3 and then to the right 4. So I go up 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, over. And I found 1 point. Now, depending where I am with my graph, I could also, if I wanted to, go down 3 and to the left 4. So 1, 2, 3, and then to the left 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. All right, there we go. And now what I have are 3 points that are on this line, and I'm able to draw a line right through it. And when we're drawing these lines, we want arrows pointing off infinitely in both directions, because the idea here is that this line is a picture of our solution. We can take any point, whole numbers or not, and pluck it from that line, and it will make this equation be true. So that's graphing in a nutshell there. So hopefully you're now caught up to speed and you feel a little bit better with what it is we were doing before spring break, and now you'll kind of do a little bit better with the stuff we'll do after spring break.